On an August morning in 2020, an 82-year-old man boarded a private jet on Portuguese soil and vanished into exile. He was not a fugitive in the traditional sense. He was the former King of Spain, Juan Carlos I, fleeing corruption allegations that would shatter the very institution he had spent 40 years building. As his plane touched down in Abu Dhabi, thousands of miles away in Madrid, a 15-year-old girl watched the news unfold. She was his granddaughter. She was the heir to the throne he had abandoned, and one day she would have to rebuild everything he had destroyed. Her name is Leonor de Todos los Santos de Borbón y Ortiz, the Princess of Asturias, the future Queen of Spain. And this is the story of how a teenage girl became the last hope of a dynasty teetering on the edge of oblivion. The palace where Leonor has spent most of her life sits on the outskirts of Madrid, hidden among the brambles and oak trees of the El Pardo estate. The Zarzuela Palace takes its name from those brambles, the zarzas that once covered these hunting grounds, when King Felipe IV commissioned a modest lodge here in 1627. 4 centuries later, this red-bricked mansion has become the nerve center of the Spanish monarchy, a place where history is made behind closed doors, and where a young princess learned early that crowns come with invisible chains. But Leonor does not actually live in the main palace. Since 2002, the royal family has occupied the Prince's Pavilion, a separate residence built within the Zarzuela grounds specifically for her father, when he was still the heir apparent. At 33,000 square feet, the pavilion is modest by royal standards. It has no gilded ballrooms, no throne rooms lined with velvet. From the outside, with its shingled roof and stucco walls, it could almost pass for an upscale suburban home. Almost. The circular driveway and the ever-present security detail betray its true nature. Inside these walls, Leonor and her younger sister Sofia grew up with a paradox that defines modern royalty. Their mother, Queen Letizia, was determined to give them as normal a childhood as possible. There were jungle gyms in the garden and casual family dinners around the kitchen table. But normalcy is a relative term when your grandfather is king, when bodyguards shadow your every move, and when your umbilical cord blood was flown to a private bank in Tucson, Arizona, the moment you were born. That last detail reveals something essential about the royal family's approach to their daughters. From Leonor's first breath on October 31st, 2005, every decision was calibrated for the long game. The stem cells preserved in that American vault represent insurance against an uncertain future. The same forward thinking that would later guide her education, her military training, and her careful preparation for a throne she never asked for but was born to inherit. The announcement of Leonor's birth made headlines around the world. She was the first child of Crown Prince Felipe and his wife Letizia, a former television journalist whose marriage to the heir had itself been a minor scandal. Letizia was a divorcee, a commoner, a woman who had built her own career before trading it for a crown. Her presence in the royal family represented a modernization that not everyone welcomed. But when she gave birth to a healthy baby girl at the Ruber International Hospital in Madrid, those concerns temporarily faded beneath the weight of a more pressing question. Would Spain change its succession laws? Under the Constitution written in 1978, male heirs take precedence over female ones. This meant that if Felipe and Letizia ever had a son, Leonor would be pushed aside, stripped of her position as heir presumptive regardless of birth order. There was talk of amending the law, of adopting absolute primogeniture like Sweden and Norway had done. But the birth of another daughter, Sofia, in 2007 seemed to remove the urgency. 2 girls and no sons meant the question could be postponed indefinitely. As of today, nearly 2 decades later, no legislation has been passed. Leonor's position remains technically vulnerable to a brother who has never been born and likely never will be. But succession laws were the least of the challenges facing the girl who would one day be queen. The real test came from a scandal that had been building for years, a scandal that would eventually force her grandfather into disgrace and exile. Juan Carlos I was once the most beloved figure in Spain. He had inherited a nation broken by civil war and decades of fascist dictatorship under Francisco Franco. When Franco died in November 1975, Juan Carlos ascended to a throne that many expected would perpetuate authoritarian rule. Instead, he shocked the world by dismantling the apparatus of oppression and guiding Spain toward democracy. His finest hour came on February 23, 1981, when military officers stormed the Spanish parliament in an attempted coup. Juan Carlos appeared on television in his military uniform, ordering the rebels to stand down. The coup collapsed. Democracy survived, and the king became a hero. For 3 decades, Spaniards forgave Juan Carlos almost anything because of that night. They forgave his alleged affairs. They overlooked rumors of financial impropriety. They accepted his lavish lifestyle as the price of having a monarch who had saved their democracy. But forgiveness has limits, and Juan Carlos found them in April 2012. He was 74 years old when he traveled to Botswana on a hunting safari, a trip that remained secret until he fractured his hip and had to be airlifted back to Spain for emergency surgery. The Spanish people learned that while they struggled through the worst economic crisis since the Civil War, while unemployment soared above 25% and families lost their homes to foreclosure, their king had been posing with the corpse of an elephant he had paid 50,000 euros to shoot. The image of Juan Carlos standing beside that dead elephant became the symbol of a monarchy out of touch with its people. Protests erupted across Spain. Approval ratings for the royal family plummeted. And worst of all, the hunting trip exposed other secrets that had been carefully hidden for years. Juan Carlos had not traveled to Botswana alone. He had been accompanied by Corinna zu Sein-Wittgenstein, a German businesswoman with whom he had reportedly been having an affair for nearly a decade. The details that emerged painted a picture of corruption on a staggering scale. Investigations in Switzerland revealed that Juan Carlos had received $100 million from King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, allegedly as a kickback related to a €6.7 billion high-speed rail contract that a Spanish consortium had won in 2008. He had allegedly transferred 65 million of those euros to Corinna, supposedly as a gift of love. When he later tried to recover the money, she refused. The recordings that emerged were damning. Corinna had been secretly taped by José Villarejo, a corrupt police chief who would later use the information as leverage in his own legal troubles. In those recordings, she described the Byzantine network of shell companies and offshore accounts that Juan Carlos had allegedly used to hide his wealth. The foundation in Liechtenstein, the Swiss bank accounts, the money flowing from Middle Eastern royal families in exchange for influence and contracts. For Leonor, still a child when the Botswana scandal broke, these revelations must have been impossible to fully comprehend. But she watched as her grandfather's reputation crumbled. She watched as her father, then still Crown Prince Felipe, was forced to distance himself from the man who had taught him everything about being king. And on June 19, 2014, she watched as Juan Carlos signed the instrument of abdication that transferred the crown to her father. That was the day Leonor officially became heir presumptive. She was 8 years old. The abdication was supposed to be a clean break, a chance for the monarchy to reinvent itself under Felipe VI. The new king immediately took steps to project an image of transparency and frugality. He published the royal family's finances. He cut staff and reduced the household budget. He banned family members from conducting private business activities. And he moved to isolate his father from the institution as the investigations continued to widen. But the past has a way of refusing to stay buried. In March 2020, just as Spain was entering the devastating first wave of the coronavirus pandemic, new revelations emerged. Felipe was named as a beneficiary on one of his father's offshore accounts. The king denied any knowledge of the arrangement and immediately renounced any inheritance he might receive from Juan Carlos. He also stripped his father of his annual allowance of 194,000 euros. It was not enough. The pressure mounted through the summer of 2020. The Supreme Court opened formal investigations. Swiss prosecutors demanded answers. And on August 3rd, Juan Carlos announced that he would leave Spain to prevent his presence from complicating his son's reign. The letter he wrote to Felipe was carefully worded, speaking of service to Spain and the desire to protect the crown. But everyone understood what it really meant. The former king was fleeing. He crossed into Portugal by car, then boarded a private jet that would eventually deliver him to the United Arab Emirates, where he remains in exile to this day. Leonor was 14 when her grandfather fled. She had grown up seeing him at family gatherings, listening to his stories of the transition to democracy, absorbing his lessons about royal duty. Now she had to watch as the man who had once been called the pilot of democracy became a cautionary tale about the corrupting influence of unchecked power. The contrast between grandfather and granddaughter could not be sharper. Where Juan Carlos cultivated an image of masculine bravado, with his hunting safaris and his sailing championships and his rumored conquests, Leonor has been raised to embody a different kind of royalty. She is studious, disciplined, reserved. She speaks Spanish, Catalan, English, and has studied French, Galician, Basque, Arabic, and Mandarin. She has been trained from childhood to serve rather than to be served. That training has taken her far from the gilded cages of Madrid. In September 2021, just a year after her grandfather's exile, Leonor enrolled at United World College Atlantic in Wales. The boarding school, set in the dramatic surroundings of St. Donat's Castle on the Welsh coast, has educated young royals from across Europe. Princess Alexia of the Netherlands was her classmate. They graduated together in May 2023, their fathers sitting side by side in the audience. Two kings watching their daughters prepare for futures that would one day mirror their own. At UWC Atlantic, Leonor lived in a dormitory room with other students. She followed the same schedule, ate the same food, participated in the same community service projects. When she returned to Spain for holidays, her tutors reportedly noted that she missed the food, prompting her father to laugh and ask where in the world she could possibly eat better than in Spain. But the boarding school years were merely a prelude to the real preparation. On August 17, 2023, 3 months after her graduation from Wales, Princess Leonor reported to the General Military Academy in Zaragoza to begin the most demanding phase of her education yet. The Spanish Constitution makes the monarch the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. For Leonor to credibly occupy that role one day, she must understand military life from the inside. The 3-year training program designed for her mirrors the path her father followed decades ago. 1 year with the Army, 1 year with the Navy, 1 year with the Air Force. By the end, she will have experienced every branch of the Spanish military and earned ranks in each. The photographs from her arrival at Zaragoza show a young woman stepping into a world utterly unlike the palaces of her childhood. Gone were the designer dresses and carefully styled hair of royal events. In their place, military fatigues and a regulation haircut. She carried her own bags. She stood in formation with 599 other cadets, 120 of them women. And she submitted to the same grueling routine that has shaped Spanish officers for generations. Her days began before dawn. There were physical training sessions that left cadets exhausted before breakfast. There were classes in military strategy, leadership, and tactics. There were drills and inspections and the constant pressure of knowing that any failure would be magnified by her royal status. When Leonor was awarded her officer's saber in September 2023, she had earned it the same way every other cadet had. 1 month later, on October 7th, she stood on the parade ground and swore an oath of allegiance to the Spanish flag. Her parents watched from the reviewing stand, her father in his own military uniform, her mother elegant but visibly moved. It was a moment that connected Leonor to centuries of Spanish military tradition, a visible symbol that the heir to the throne would not ask her soldiers to do anything she had not done herself. The oath she swore that day was significant for another reason. Under Spanish law, the heir presumptive must swear allegiance to the Constitution upon reaching the age of majority. Leonor's 18th birthday fell on October 31st, 2023, just weeks after her military oath. On that day, she appeared before the Cortes General, the Spanish Parliament, and pledged her loyalty to the Constitution and the King. The ceremony at the Parliament building was broadcast live across Spain. Leonor stood at the podium in a white dress, her composure remarkable for someone so young. She spoke clearly and confidently, her words carefully chosen to honor tradition while signaling a new generation's arrival. When she finished, her father presented her with the collar of the Order of Charles III, the highest civil honor in Spain. That evening, the royal family hosted a private celebration at the Royal Palace of El Pardo, the sprawling estate where Franco once lived and where visiting heads of state now stay. Leonor's maternal and paternal relatives gathered alongside members of other European royal houses. The Greek royals came, represented by Queen Anne-Marie and Princess Alexia. Members of the House of Bourbon II Sicilies attended. It was a reminder that despite all the scandals and controversies, the Spanish monarchy remains embedded in a network of aristocratic connections that spans the continent. But Leonor had no time to rest on ceremony. Within weeks, she was back at the military academy, back to the pre-dawn wake-up calls and the endless drills. In January 2024, she participated in the 24th Sports Championship of Military Academies for Officers, competing in fencing and volleyball as one of the representatives of the General Military Academy. Her team won a silver medal in the mixed team fencing competition. It was a small victory in the larger campaign to prove herself worthy of the crown. The Spanish press has followed Leonor's military training with intense interest, documenting her every public appearance and speculating about her private life. When photographs emerged of her dancing at a nightclub in Zaragoza during a break from training, the palace reportedly expressed concern. King Felipe is said to have warned his daughter about the importance of maintaining her image, of remembering that every moment in public is potentially being recorded by someone with a smartphone. The security challenges around Leonor have become increasingly complex. Her protection detail includes members of the Royal Household Security Service, the National Police, and the Civil Guard. These agents have had to adapt to protecting a young woman who wants to experience something resembling normal life while remaining one of the most high-profile targets in Spain. Reports have surfaced of tension between Leonor and her bodyguards, of the princess pushing back against what she perceives as excessive surveillance. Finding the balance between security and autonomy is a challenge that every young royal faces, but for Leonor, the stakes are particularly high. In July 2024, Leonor was promoted to the rank of cadet ensign and awarded the Grand Cross of Military Merit by her father. A few weeks later, the Council of Ministers formally appointed her as midshipman, clearing the way for the second year of her military training. On August 29, 2024, she reported to the Naval Military Academy in Marine, a town on the Galician coast where the Atlantic winds carry the salt spray of the sea. The naval training has been in many ways more demanding than the Army phase. In January 2025, Leonor boarded the Juan Sebastián de Elcano, a four-masted training ship that has carried Spanish naval cadets around the world since 1928. The vessel embarked on a 5-month voyage that would take Leonor across the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, with stops throughout Latin America and a final call in New York City. For nearly half a year, the heir to the Spanish throne lived as a sailor. She stood watch on deck. She climbed rigging. She learned navigation and seamanship from officers who judged her not by her title but by her performance. The voyage was a test of endurance and character, a chance for Leonor to prove herself far from the comfort of palaces and the scrutiny of the Spanish press. When the Elcano docked in various Latin American ports, Leonor's presence drew enormous crowds. The Spanish-speaking world watched with fascination as this young princess walked the same decks that generations of Spanish sailors had walked before her. She represented something new, a modern monarchy that valued service over privilege, competence over birthright. The final leg of Leonor's naval training took her aboard the frigate Blas de Lezo, where she participated in live-fire naval exercises. This was not ceremonial training. She was learning the skills she might one day need to command as the constitutional head of Spain's armed forces. The exercises were dangerous, the conditions demanding, the expectations unforgiving. As of late 2025, Leonor has completed her naval training and is preparing for the final year of her military education at the General Air Academy in San Javier, Murcia. When she finishes in 2026, she will have earned qualifications in all 3 branches of the Spanish military. But her education will not be complete. Following her military service, she is expected to attend university, earning both undergraduate and postgraduate degrees as her father did before her. The path ahead is long and demanding. But Leonor has already demonstrated qualities that give supporters of the monarchy reason for hope. She is disciplined where her grandfather was self-indulgent. She is private where he was flamboyant. She understands that the survival of the Spanish crown depends not on the privileges it confers, but on the service it renders. The palaces that await her inheritance tell the story of that service and that privilege across 5 centuries. The royal palace of Madrid, rising above the Manzanares River in the heart of the capital, is the official residence of the Spanish monarch, though no king has actually lived there since Alfonso XIII fled into exile in 1931. With over 3,400 rooms spread across 1.5 million square feet, it is the largest royal palace in Western Europe, larger than Buckingham Palace, larger than Versailles. The palace that stands today was commissioned by King Philip V after a devastating fire destroyed the old Alcazar on Christmas Eve, 1734. Philip wanted a statement of Bourbon power to rival the great palaces of France, and he hired Italian architects to make his vision reality. Construction began in 1738 under the direction of Filippo Juvara, though he died before the project could be completed. His disciple Giovanni Battista Sacchetti took over, and the palace was finally ready for occupation when King Charles III moved in during 1764. The treasures housed within those walls are almost beyond calculation. Over 150,000 objects fill the rooms, from Stradivarius violins to Goya paintings to the ceremonial armor of Charles V. The Royal Armoury contains one of the finest collections of historical weaponry in the world, with pieces dating back to the 13th century. Tapestries woven from designs by Raphael and Goya line the corridors. Frescoes by Tiepolo cover the ceilings, depicting the glory of the Spanish monarchy in colors that still blaze after 2.5 centuries. Leonor knows these rooms intimately. She has walked the main staircase designed by Sabatini, its marble lions guarding the ascent to the state apartments. She has sat in the throne room during official ceremonies, beneath a ceiling painted by Tiepolo that shows Spain's provinces paying homage to the crown. She has dined in the gala dining room, where the table can seat 140 guests beneath chandeliers of Bohemian crystal. But the royal palace is more than a museum of past glory. It remains the venue for the most important ceremonies of the Spanish state. When Leonor's parents married in May 2004, the wedding banquet was held in the central courtyard. When her father was proclaimed king in June 2014, the ceremony took place in the Congress of Deputies, but the celebrations continued at the palace. And one day, when Leonor ascends to the throne, it will be within these walls that she receives the homage of a nation. The contrast between the ceremonial grandeur of the royal palace and the modest domesticity of the prince's pavilion captures something essential about the modern Spanish monarchy. Leonor's parents have deliberately chosen to raise their daughters away from overwhelming opulence, to give them some approximation of a normal family life before the weight of the crown descends fully upon them. The palaces are tools of state, not homes. They are stages upon which the drama of monarchy is performed, not refugees from the world. And yet those palaces represent something that Leonor will one day have to defend. Not just buildings, but the idea of monarchy itself. Polls consistently show that Spaniards are roughly evenly divided on whether their country should remain a constitutional monarchy or become a republic. The scandals of Juan Carlos's later years pushed support for the monarchy to historic lows. Recovery has been slow and fragile, dependent on the conduct of every member of the royal family. This is the burden that Leonor carries as she completes her training and prepares for a future that will test her in ways she cannot yet imagine. She must be competent, but not arrogant. She must be accessible, but not overexposed. She must honor tradition while embodying change. She must somehow convince a skeptical nation that an institution rooted in hereditary privilege still has value in a democratic age. The challenges awaiting her are immense. Climate change and economic inequality will reshape Spanish society in the decades ahead. Questions of regional autonomy, particularly in Catalonia and the Basque Country, will continue to strain national unity. The European project faces uncertain headwinds, and always in the background lurks the memory of what her grandfather did and the damage he caused. But there are also reasons for hope. Leonor has shown herself capable of meeting high expectations. Her education has prepared her to engage with a changing world. Her military training has earned her credibility with the armed forces she will one day command. And her conduct, so far at least, has been exemplary. The story of Princess Leonor is still being written. She is 19 years old, with decades of service ahead of her before she might wear the crown. Much can change in that time. Spain itself may transform in ways that make monarchy obsolete, or it may find in its young princess a symbol of continuity and stability that helps it navigate troubled waters. What is certain is that Leonor understands the stakes. She has watched her grandfather fall from hero to exile. She has seen how quickly public adoration can curdle into contempt. She knows that the survival of her family's position depends not on the palaces they occupy, or the titles they bear, but on the trust they earn from the people they serve. In the end, that is what separates Leonor's generation from her grandfather's. Juan Carlos believed that saving democracy gave him license to enrich himself. He confused the crown's interests with his own. Leonor has been raised to understand that the crown belongs to Spain, not to the Bourbons. She is its temporary custodian, not its owner. The brambles that gave the Zarzuela Palace its name have long since been cleared away. But the thorns of monarchy remain, ready to draw blood from anyone who forgets that privilege demands sacrifice, and that crowns are heavy precisely because they are made of duty, not gold. As Leonor continues her journey toward the throne, she carries the weight of that understanding. She is Spain's hope for redemption after scandal, its bridge between a troubled past and an uncertain future. She is the princess who grew up watching her grandfather fall, and who has spent every day since proving that she will not repeat his mistakes. The palaces await her. The crown awaits her. History awaits her. And Leonor, the girl who became heir at 8 years old, the teenager who watched her grandfather flee into exile, the young woman who swore oaths to flag and constitution before she could legally drink, is doing everything in her power to be ready when her moment comes. This is the first chapter of her story. The rest is yet to be written. But before we turn to what lies ahead, we must understand more deeply where she comes from. The Royal Palace of Madrid is not merely a building. It is a statement of power that has endured earthquakes, wars, and revolutions. When Philip V ordered its construction in the 18th century, he specified that it be built entirely of stone and brick, with no wood that could feed the flames that had consumed the old Alcazar. He had learned from tragedy that palaces, like dynasties, are only as durable as the materials from which they are made. The same lesson applies to monarchies themselves. They survive not through divine right or hereditary accident, but through the accumulated trust of generations. Juan Carlos spent that trust like a man who believed the account would never run dry. Felipe has worked to rebuild it, one transparent budget and one cancelled hunting trip at a time. Leonor will inherit whatever balance remains. The Gallery of Royal Collections, which opened in June 2023 after decades of delays and €186 million in construction costs, offers a window into the wealth that Spanish monarchs have accumulated over 5 centuries. More than 650 masterpieces are on display at any given time, selected from over 160,000 objects in the royal inventory. Works by Velázquez, Goya, Caravaggio, Titian, and El Greco hang on walls that also display tapestries designed by Raphael and armor worn by Charles V at the Battle of Mühlberg. During excavation for the gallery, workers discovered remnants of a 9th century Arab wall, evidence that Madrid was once a Muslim city centuries before any Christian king claimed it. Those ancient stones are now incorporated into the museum, a reminder that Spanish history contains multitudes, that the story of the monarchy is only one thread in a tapestry woven by many hands across many centuries. Leonor will one day preside over this inheritance. She will decide which treasures to display and which to keep in storage. She will welcome foreign dignitaries into rooms decorated with the plunder of empires and the gifts of allied kings. And she will do so, knowing that every choice she makes reflects not just on herself, but on the institution she represents. The Stradivarius violins in the palace collection, are among the finest examples of the luthier's art ever created. They date from the late 17th and early 18th centuries, a period when Antonio Stradivari was producing instruments whose sound has never been equaled. The Spanish royal family acquired them as symbols of cultural sophistication, proof that the Bourbons were patrons of the highest arts. Today they sit in climate-controlled cases, played only on the rarest occasions. Their value measured not in money, but in the beauty they can still produce. Music has always mattered to Spanish royalty. The Zarzuela Palace itself gave its name to a form of Spanish operetta that originated there in the 17th century. The courts of Ferdinand and Isabella hosted musicians and composers, and Leonor's grandmother, Queen Sofia, is known as a devoted patron of classical music who has worked throughout her life to support cultural institutions. This cultural dimension of monarchy is easy to overlook amid scandals and succession questions. But it matters. A royal family that values art and music and literature demonstrates that not all power is about politics and money. It suggests that there are dimensions of human experience worth protecting, traditions worth preserving, beauty worth creating. Leonor's education has included exposure to these traditions, preparation for the day when she will be expected to embody them. The summer palace at Marivent in Mallorca offers a different vision of royal life. Perched on rocky oceanfront land with views across the bay to Palma, it has been the traditional summer retreat of the Spanish royal family for decades. King Juan Carlos spent countless August holidays there, sailing and entertaining, and, as we now know, conducting affairs that would eventually contribute to his downfall. Queen Sofia still uses the property, refusing to accompany her husband into exile, but also refusing to forgive. Leonor has spent summers at Marivent since childhood, swimming in Mediterranean waters and walking the ancient streets of Palma's old town. These were among the few moments when she could experience something approaching the freedom that ordinary teenagers take for granted. The sea does not care about titles or succession laws. The waves break the same for princesses as for peasants. But even in Mallorca, privacy is elusive. Photographers with long lenses wait outside the palace gates. Tour boats cruise past, hoping for a glimpse of royalty on the terrace. Every shopping trip becomes a potential headline. Leonor learned early that there is no true escape from the fishbowl of royal existence, only brief reprieves between public appearances. The weight of expectation can crush those unprepared to bear it. History is littered with the wreckage of young royals who broke under pressure, who turned to addiction or scandal or abdication to escape the prison of their birth. Leonor has so far shown no signs of such fragility, but she is still young. The real tests lie ahead, in the years when she must balance her own desires against the demands of the crown, when she must choose a partner who will share her gilded cage, when she must decide what kind of queen she wants to be. Her mother's example offers one model. Queen Letizia transformed herself from television journalist to consort, mastering the protocols and restrictions of royal life while maintaining her own identity and interests. She has been a visible advocate for education, nutrition, and health causes. She has raised her daughters to be competent and confident, and she has navigated the treacherous waters of palace intrigue with a sophistication that surprised those who dismissed her as a commoner playing at royalty. Leonor will need all of her mother's skills and more. She will be not the consort, but the sovereign, not the supporting player, but the lead. The constitutional role of the Spanish monarch is largely ceremonial, but ceremony matters. The king or queen represents national unity, stands above partisan politics, embodies the continuity of the state across changes of government. In a country still haunted by civil war and dictatorship, still divided by regional separatism, that symbolic function carries real weight. The question that hangs over Leonor's future is whether that weight will be enough. Whether the symbolic value of monarchy can survive in an age of social media and radical transparency. Whether a young woman born to privilege can convince a skeptical nation that she deserves their allegiance. The answer will depend on choices she has yet to make and challenges she has yet to face. It will depend on whether she can maintain the discipline she has shown so far through decades of public scrutiny. It will depend on luck and circumstance, on the health of her father, on the political winds that will shape Spain in the years ahead. But most of all, it will depend on Leonor herself, on the character she has developed and the values she has absorbed, on her ability to learn from her grandfather's mistakes without being paralyzed by them, on her capacity to honor tradition while embracing change. The palaces will be there, magnificent and waiting. The crown will be there, heavy with centuries of history. The people of Spain will be there, watching and judging, deciding whether this ancient institution still deserves their support. And Leonor will be there, ready or not, the princess who must become a queen. The palaces will be there, magnificent and waiting. The crown will be there, heavy with centuries of history. The people of Spain will be there, watching and judging, deciding whether this ancient institution still deserves their support. And Leonor will be there, ready or not, the princess who must become a queen. But readiness is not a destination. It is a journey. And Leonor's journey has taken her farther than most young women her age will ever travel. On January 8, 2025, Princess Leonor walked up the gangway of the Juan Sebastián de Elcano, a four-masted training ship that has carried generations of Spanish naval officers around the world. For the next 5 months, she would live as a sailor, sharing quarters with 74 other cadets, standing watch through Atlantic storms, learning the ancient arts of navigation by stars that her ancestors once used to chart the course to a new world. The voyage took her across the Atlantic to Brazil, where crowds gathered at the ports to catch a glimpse of the Spanish princess. It carried her to Uruguay and Argentina, to Chile and Peru, to Colombia and the Dominican Republic. At each stop, Leonor represented not just the Spanish Navy, but the Spanish nation, a young woman carrying the weight of history on shoulders that had grown stronger with every league sailed. The photographs from those months at sea show someone transformed. The carefully styled princess of royal portraits had become a sailor, her hair pulled back against the wind, her hands calloused from hauling lines, her face weathered by salt and sun. She climbed rigging that swayed 50 feet above the deck. She took her turn at the helm through swells that would test any sailor's nerve. And she did it all under the same scrutiny that had followed her since birth, knowing that every stumble would be magnified and every success would be attributed to privilege rather than effort. When the Elcano docked in New York City in June 2025, Leonor had completed one of the most demanding phases of her training. She flew back to Spain to board the frigate Blas de Lezo for the final month of naval exercises, including live fire drills that brought home the serious purpose behind all those ceremonial uniforms. This was not play acting at military service. This was the real thing, preparation for the day when she might have to send young Spaniards into danger. On July 16, 2025, at the Naval Military Academy in Marine, King Felipe presented his daughter with the Grand Cross of Naval Merit with white decoration. The ceremony marked the official end of Leonor's naval training and the beginning of her final year in uniform. Standing on that parade ground, surrounded by the cadets who had become her shipmates and friends, Leonor spoke with the confidence of someone who had earned her place. She described her time in the Navy as intense and demanding, but also spoke of the good atmosphere and the food that she had enjoyed in Galicia. She acknowledged that time had passed quickly, that the months in Marine had flowed into the training cruise, and then the weeks on the frigate. But whether on land or at sea, she said, this year had served to strengthen the values of honor, valor, discipline, and loyalty that define the Spanish Navy. Those were not empty words from a princess reading a prepared script. They were the reflections of a young woman who had lived those values, who had tested them against the demands of service, who had found them worth keeping. The city of Marin honored her with the title of adopted daughter, the first person ever to receive that distinction. The regional government of Galicia awarded her its gold medal. These were not hereditary honors bestowed at birth. They were recognitions earned through service. But even as Leonor celebrated the completion of her naval training, another chapter was beginning for the Spanish royal family. Her younger sister, Infanta Sofia, was preparing to embark on her own journey, one that would take her far from Spain, but on a very different path. Unlike Leonor, who had chosen military service as the foundation of her royal education, Sofia had decided that her preparation for a life of public service would come through academic study. In July 2025, the royal household announced that Sofia would attend Forward College, an international institution affiliated with the London School of Economics that operates campuses in 3 European capitals. Sofia would spend her first year in Lisbon, studying political science and international relations, alongside students from 40 different nationalities. Her second year would take her to Paris, and her third to Berlin. By the time she graduated, she would have lived in 3 different countries, learned to navigate 3 different cultures, and developed the kind of international perspective that modern diplomacy requires. The contrast between the 2 sisters captures something important about the modern Spanish monarchy. Leonor, as heir to the throne, must prepare to be commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Her military training is not optional, but constitutional. Sofia, as second in line, has more freedom to choose her own path. She considered joining the military, reportedly even exploring the possibility of training as a helicopter pilot. But in the end, she decided that her talents and interests lay elsewhere. The decision reflects the values that Felipe and Letizia have tried to instill in their daughters. Both young women were encouraged to follow their own interests, to develop their own identities, to prepare for lives of service in ways that fit their individual strengths. Leonor will one day wear the crown. Sofia will one day support her sister as the trusted counselor that every monarch needs. Both roles are essential, and both require serious preparation. When Sofia arrived in Lisbon in September 2025, photographs showed her exploring her new city with the same mixture of curiosity and composure that had marked her sister's arrival in Wales 4 years earlier. She posed near the Jerónimos Monastery and the Fonte Monumental de Belém, landmarks of Portuguese history that also connect to Spain's own imperial past. She moved into the student residence in Benfica and began the introduction activities that would help her adjust to university life. The tuition at Forward College runs approximately 18,500 euros per year, paid by her parents rather than public funds. This detail matters in a country where debates about the cost of the monarchy never quite go away. Felipe and Letizia have been careful to distinguish between the public duties that justify taxpayer support and the private choices that should be funded privately. Sofia's education falls into the latter category. Meanwhile, Leonor reported to the General Air and Space Academy in San Javier on September 1, 2025, to begin the final year of her military training. She would learn to fly, joining a long tradition of royal aviators that includes her father and extends across European monarchies. The entry in the Academy's Book of Honor captured her enthusiasm for this new challenge, her eagerness to begin aeronautical training and learn the practical and theoretical aspects of military aviation alongside her classmates. The photographs from San Javier show Leonor in yet another uniform, this time the distinctive blue of the Spanish Air Force. She stands among rows of cadets, indistinguishable in some ways from any other young officer candidate, yet carrying responsibilities that set her apart from everyone around her. When she completes this training in 2026, she will have earned qualifications in all three branches of the Spanish military, a foundation for the constitutional role she will one day assume. But military training is not the end of Leonor's education. Following her Air Force service, she is expected to attend university, earning both undergraduate and postgraduate degrees, as her father did before her. The details remain unannounced, but precedent suggests she might study law, as Felipe did at the Autonomous University of Madrid, before pursuing a master's degree abroad, perhaps at Georgetown University in Washington, where her father earned his credential in foreign service. The timeline stretches years into the future, a carefully planned progression from cadet to queen. Yet the future has a way of disrupting even the most careful plans. King Felipe is 57 years old, healthy and vigorous, with potentially decades of reign ahead of him. But monarchs die unexpectedly, and abdication is always possible. Leonor must be prepared for any eventuality, ready to assume the crown tomorrow even as she plans for responsibilities that may not come for years. This paradox defines her existence. She must live in the present, experiencing military training and eventually university life with the engagement they deserve. But she must also live in anticipation of a future that will transform her from private person to public symbol. The transition, when it comes, will be total and irreversible. There is no retirement from monarchy, no sabbatical from sovereignty, no escape from the fishbowl once the crown descends. The poll numbers offer some comfort. Surveys consistently show that Leonor is the most popular member of the Spanish royal family, with approval ratings that dwarf those of any politician and even exceed those of her father. In one recent survey, she scored an impressive 8.1 out of 10, compared to 6.9 for King Felipe and a dismal 3.4 for Juan Carlos. Among young Spaniards, who tend to be more skeptical of monarchy as an institution, Leonor's personal approval remains remarkably high. Analysts attribute this popularity to several factors. She has no baggage, no history of scandal, no associations with the corruption that brought down her grandfather. Her story is one of normal family life and serious study, of earning her place rather than assuming it. She represents a fresh start for a dynasty that desperately needed one, a counter-image to the excess and entitlement that had come to define Juan Carlos's later years. But popularity is fragile, and the Spanish public has long memories. They remember how much they once loved Juan Carlos, how they forgave him almost anything because of his role in the transition to democracy. They remember how that forgiveness curdled into contempt when they saw him posing with the dead elephant, when they learned about the secret accounts in Switzerland, when they watched him flee to the Gulf rather than face the consequences of his choices. Leonor knows this history. She has lived it. She watched her grandfather fall from national hero to disgraced exile in the span of a few years. She saw how quickly decades of accumulated goodwill could evaporate when the public felt betrayed. and she understands, perhaps better than anyone her age could, that the love of the Spanish people is something to be earned every day, not collected once and stored against future transgressions. This understanding shapes everything she does. Her choice to live like any other cadet during military training, sharing rooms and following the same schedule as everyone else, sends a message about the kind of queen she intends to be. Her willingness to take on demanding physical challenges, to climb rigging and stand watch and participate in live fire exercises, demonstrates that she does not expect to be exempted from difficulty because of her birth. Her careful public statements, always measured and appropriate, show awareness that every word she speaks will be analyzed and remembered. The Spanish Constitution of 1978, ratified when the nation was still finding its footing after decades of dictatorship, established Spain as a parliamentary monarchy. The king or queen serves as head of state, but holds no political power. The monarch represents national unity, performs ceremonial duties, receives foreign dignitaries, opens parliament, and provides continuity across changes of government. It is a role that requires presence without interference, authority without authoritarianism, dignity without distance. Felipe has performed this role with notable success, navigating crises that might have sunk a less skilled monarch. When Catalonia declared independence in October 2017, threatening to fracture the Spanish state, Felipe addressed the nation in terms that were firm but not inflammatory, defending constitutional order while leaving room for political resolution. When floods devastated Valencia in October 2024, killing hundreds and displacing thousands, Felipe and Letizia traveled to the affected areas to offer comfort, enduring angry confrontations from victims who blamed the government for inadequate response. That visit to Paiporta, where protesters threw mud and objects at the royal couple, tested Felipe in ways that few modern monarchs have experienced. The prime minister was evacuated for his safety, but Felipe and Letizia remained, listening to the complaints of citizens who had lost everything. The decision to stay, to absorb the anger rather than flee from it, demonstrated something important about the kind of monarchy they are trying to build. It showed that the crown serves the people, not the other way around. Leonor was not present in Paiporta, but she watched and learned. She saw how her parents handled a situation that could have gone catastrophically wrong. She absorbed the lesson that royal duty sometimes means standing in the path of fury, accepting the anger of people who need someone to blame, being present when presence itself is the only gift you can offer. These are not skills taught in military academies or universities. They are learned through observation and experience, passed down from generation to generation of those who bear the weight of crowns. The Princess of Asturias Awards, held each October in Oviedo, provide an annual showcase for Leonor's growing confidence and capability. The ceremony brings together laureates from around the world, honoring achievements in science, humanities, sports, and international cooperation. As Princess of Asturias, Leonor presides over the event, delivering speeches that have grown more assured with each passing year. In October 2025, just days before her 20th birthday, Leonor presided over the 7th edition of the awards as an adult. She spoke of the accomplices and allies that sisters provide, a tender reference to Sofia that reminded viewers that behind the titles and ceremonies, this is a family that cares for each other. She met with tennis legend Serena Williams, who was among the honored guests, conducting herself with the poise of someone twice her age. Her 20th birthday fell on October 31st, 2025, a Friday that allowed her to spend a rare weekend at home with family. For the first time in years, she could celebrate among loved ones, rather than in the isolation of military training. Her grandmother, Queen Sofia, whose 87th birthday falls just 2 days later, joined the family gathering at the Zarzuela Palace. The royal household did not release official photographs of the celebration, respecting Leonor's desire for a private moment amid a very public life. Reports suggest the evening included a chocolate cake, a favorite of both Leonor and her grandmother, and the company of friends from different chapters of her life. Classmates from Santa Maria de los Rosales, fellow students from Wales, cadets from Zaragoza and Marine, officers from the Air Academy. These friendships represent something precious and precarious. Leonor can never be certain whether people like her for herself or for her position. She must constantly evaluate relationships for sincerity, watching for those who seek proximity to power rather than genuine connection. The friends who have passed this test, who have known her through years of shared experience, form a support network that will matter more as the burdens of her position increase. The question of romance inevitably arises for any young royal, and Spanish media have speculated about Leonor's relationships with the intensity that tabloids bring to such matters. A former classmate named Gabriel Giacomelli has been mentioned as a possible romantic interest, though sources close to the family insist they are simply friends. Leonor has shown no interest in public dating, keeping her personal life as private as her circumstances allow. When the time comes for her to choose a partner, the decision will carry weight beyond the personal. Her spouse will become a public figure, subject to scrutiny and expectation that few are prepared to bear. The example of her mother offers both inspiration and warning. Queen Letizia successfully made the transition from commoner to consort, but the adjustment was not easy, and she has faced criticism and speculation throughout her marriage. Whoever Leonor chooses will need extraordinary resilience, unshakable discretion, and genuine commitment to a life of service. But those decisions lie in the future. For now, Leonor remains focused on her training, her studies, and her gradual assumption of royal duties. Each speech she delivers, each ceremony she attends, each foreign dignitary she meets, adds to the reservoir of experience she will draw upon as queen. The Spanish people watch her grow into her role, forming opinions that will shape their relationship with the monarchy for decades to come. The transformation of the Spanish royal family over the past decade represents one of the most remarkable recoveries in modern royal history. From the depths of scandal that drove Juan Carlos into exile, Felipe has rebuilt the institution through a combination of transparency, austerity, and exemplary conduct. He cut ties with his father, renounced his inheritance, and demonstrated repeatedly that he would prioritize the interests of Spain over family loyalty. Leonor embodies the culmination of this recovery. She represents the clean slate that Spain needed, the promise that the future need not repeat the mistakes of the past. Her discipline, her dedication, her willingness to earn rather than assume her position have won her admirers across the political spectrum. Even Republicans, who would abolish the monarchy entirely, tend to express respect for Leonor personally, distinguishing between their opposition to the institution and their opinion of the young woman who will one day lead it. The polls that show nearly 60% of Spaniards supporting the constitutional monarchy, compared to about 33% favoring a republic, suggest that the institution has stabilized after years of crisis. This is not the overwhelming support that Juan Carlos once enjoyed, but it is sufficient to secure the monarchy's position for the foreseeable future. And as Leonor continues to impress the public with her maturity and commitment, those numbers may well improve. The palaces that house the Spanish royal heritage will still be standing in 50 years. their Goyas and Velázquez's and Stradivariuses preserved for future generations. The zarzuela will still shelter the monarch, whether that monarch is Felipe in his retirement, or Leonor on her throne, or some yet unborn descendant carrying the Bourbon name. The Royal Palace of Madrid will still host state ceremonies, its chandeliers still blazing over diplomatic dinners and royal receptions. What matters is not whether these buildings survive, but whether they retain meaning. A palace without purpose becomes a museum, interesting to visit but irrelevant to the life of the nation. A monarchy without public support becomes an anachronism, tolerated perhaps, but not cherished. The challenge for Leonor is to ensure that when she takes the throne, the Spanish people see not a relic of the past, but a symbol of their shared future. She has made a promising start. The girl who watched her grandfather flee into exile has become a young woman who earns her honors through service. The teenager who took an oath to the Constitution before she could vote has become a military officer qualified in 3 branches of the armed forces. The princess raised in the shelter of the zarzuela has traveled the world, learning languages and cultures that will serve her in the diplomacy that modern monarchy requires. There will be challenges ahead that no one can predict. Economic crises and political upheavals, regional tensions and generational changes, personal tragedies and public controversies. Leonor will face them all, drawing on the training she has received and the character she has developed. She will make mistakes, as all leaders do, and she will be judged more harshly for them because of her position. She will have triumphs that bring her closer to her people, and trials that test her resolve. But she will not be alone. Her sister Sophia will stand beside her, the trusted confidant who shares her history and understands her burdens. Her parents will offer the wisdom of experience for as long as they live. The staff of the royal household will provide the institutional support that keeps the monarchy functioning. And the Spanish people, in their millions, will watch and judge and ultimately decide whether this ancient institution still deserves their allegiance. The story of Princess Leonor is the story of modern monarchy itself, of whether hereditary power can survive in a democratic age, of whether ancient traditions can adapt to contemporary expectations, of whether a young woman born to privilege can convince skeptical citizens that she deserves to lead them. It is a story still being written, its ending unknown, its outcome dependent on choices yet to be made. What we know is this: Leonor is ready. She has prepared as thoroughly as any heir in Spanish history. She has demonstrated the discipline, the intelligence, and the dedication that her future role requires. She has earned the respect of those who know her and the admiration of those who watch from afar. She has shown that she understands what her grandfather forgot, that crowns are earned through service, not bestowed as birthrights. The brambles that gave the zarzuela its name have long since been cleared away. But from those royal grounds, a new growth has emerged, strong and straight and reaching toward the light. Princess Leonor de Todos los Santos de Borbón y Ortiz, the girl who became heir at 8, the young woman who turned 20 in the midst of military training, will one day be Queen of Spain. And when that day comes, she will be ready. The palaces await her, magnificent testaments to 5 centuries of royal history. The crown awaits her, symbol of a nation that has survived civil wars and dictatorships to emerge as a modern democracy. The Spanish people await her, hopeful that the future will be better than the past, that the sins of the grandfather will not be visited upon the granddaughter, that this young woman who has worked so hard to prepare herself will prove worthy of their trust. Leonor knows what is expected of her She has spent her entire life preparing for a role that many would consider a burden, but that she has embraced as a calling. She has studied the Constitution she will swear to protect. She has trained with the military she will one day command. She has traveled the world that Spain once explored and continues to engage. She has learned the languages and cultures of her European neighbors and her Latin American cousins. She has also learned the lessons that her family's history teaches. She has seen what happens when a monarch forgets that the crown belongs to the nation, not to the person who wears it. She has watched her father work tirelessly to rebuild what her grandfather destroyed. She has absorbed the values of service over self, of duty over desire, of sacrifice over luxury. When Princess Leonor ascends to the throne, she will become the first queen regnant of Spain since Isabella II, whose troubled reign ended in 1868. She will carry the hopes of millions who see in her a chance for renewal, for a monarchy purged of scandal and dedicated to service. She will face challenges that no one can predict and pressures that few can imagine. But she will face them with the preparation of a lifetime and the support of a nation that has come to believe in her. She will face them as the woman she has made herself, through years of discipline and dedication and hard work. She will face them as the heir her father raised, the sister Sophia loves, the granddaughter who chose a different path than the one her grandfather took. And Spain will be watching, ready to judge, but also ready to hope. Ready to believe that the future can be better than the past. Ready to trust in a young woman who has earned their respect through her actions, not claimed it through her birth. The story of Leonor is a story of redemption, not just of one royal family, but of the idea of monarchy itself in a democratic age. It is a story of how scandal can be overcome through service, how trust can be rebuilt through transparency, how a nation's faith in its institutions can be restored through the dedication of those who lead them. It is, in the end, a story of hope. And hope, like Leonor herself, is ready for whatever comes next. The summer palace at Marivent will welcome her back each August, as it has welcomed Spanish royalty for generations. The Mediterranean will still sparkle beneath its terraces, and the boats will still sail across the bay to Palma, and the photographers will still wait at the gates, hoping for a glimpse of the royal family at rest. But when Leonor returns as queen, she will bring with her a different energy, the confidence of a woman who has proven herself rather than the anxiety of a girl still learning her place. The treasure houses of Spanish royalty will open their vaults to her judgment. She will decide which of the 160,000 objects in the royal collection to display and which to keep in storage. She will choose which masterpieces by Goya and Velázquez and Caravaggio deserve prominence in the royal collections gallery, and which should rotate through temporary exhibitions. These may seem like small decisions, but they represent the cultural stewardship that monarchs have exercised for centuries, the shaping of national identity through the preservation and presentation of artistic heritage. The Stradivarius Quartet that sits in the climate-controlled cases of the Royal Palace will still produce its incomparable sound when played by master musicians for state occasions. The tapestries designed by Raphael and Goya will still line the corridors. Their colors perhaps a bit faded, but their artistry undiminished. The armor of Charles V will still stand as testimony to an empire on which the sun never set, a reminder of Spain's central role in the history of the Western world. Leonor will be the custodian of all this heritage, responsible for passing it intact to whatever heir she may produce, extending the chain of continuity that connects modern Spain to its medieval roots. The responsibility is immense, but she has been preparing for it since she first walked the halls of the royal palace as a child, since she first understood that the treasures around her belonged not to her family, but to her nation, held in trust by the crown for the benefit of all Spaniards. Her education continues even now, in the cockpits of training aircraft and the classrooms of the Air Academy, in the conversations she has with fellow cadets and the briefings she receives on matters of state. Each day adds to her store of knowledge and experience. Each challenge overcome adds to her confidence and capability. By the time she takes the throne, whether that comes in 5 years or 50, she will have accumulated a lifetime of preparation for a role that admits no rehearsal, no practice runs, no second chances. The Spanish people who will judge her have their own preparations to make. They must decide what they expect from their monarchy, what role it should play in their national life, what standards they will hold their queen to when the moment comes. The debates about republicanism versus monarchy that surface periodically in Spanish politics are ultimately debates about national identity, about whether Spain should look backward to tradition or forward to a different kind of future. Leonor offers an answer to those debates not through argument, but through example. She shows what a modern monarchy can be, stripped of the excess and entitlement that brought down her grandfather, grounded in service and sacrifice rather than privilege and pleasure. She demonstrates that hereditary leadership need not mean hereditary indolence, that those born to power can earn the right to exercise it through dedication and hard work. The young Spaniards who will live under her reign are watching and forming their opinions. They see a princess their own age going through military training, sailing around the world, preparing for responsibilities that dwarf anything they will ever face. Some are impressed, recognizing the discipline and commitment that her choices represent. Others remain skeptical, wondering whether any unelected leader can truly represent a democratic nation. The debate will continue for as long as Leonor wears the crown, but the outcome of that debate will be shaped by Leonor herself, by the queen she becomes, by the decisions she makes, by the way she handles the inevitable crises that will test her reign. If she continues on the path she has begun, if she maintains the values she has demonstrated so far, if she remembers always that the crown exists to serve the nation rather than the other way around, then she will have the best possible chance of winning the argument through her actions. The story ends where it began, at the Zarzuela Palace outside Madrid, where a young woman is preparing for a future that will shape the destiny of a nation. The brambles are gone, replaced by carefully tended gardens and security perimeters and the apparatus of modern royalty. But somewhere in those grounds, perhaps in a quiet corner where the oaks still grow thick, there might still be a bramble or two, a reminder of wildness amid all the ceremony, of nature's persistence against human order. Leonor de Todos los Santos de Borbón y Ortiz carries that wildness within her, the spark of individual personality that no amount of royal training can extinguish. She is not a product manufactured by palace image makers, but a real person with her own thoughts, her own dreams, her own fears about the future that awaits her. The protocols and ceremonies that structure her life are the frame, not the painting. What she makes of her reign will depend on who she is inside, on the choices she makes when no one is watching, on the character she has developed through years of challenge and growth. That character has been tested and proven. The princess who might have retreated into privilege chose instead to embrace challenge. The heir who might have coasted on her birthright chose instead to earn her honors through service. The young woman who might have rebelled against the restrictions of royal life chose instead to find freedom within them, to make the role her own while respecting the traditions that define it. When history judges Princess Leonor, as it judges all who wear crowns, the verdict will depend on what happens next, on the choices she has yet to make, on the queen she has yet to become. But the foundation has been laid, strong and deep, in military academies and training ships, in foreign capitals and family gatherings, in quiet moments of reflection and public performances of duty. The future Queen of Spain is ready. The nation that will be hers to serve is watching. The palaces that will be hers to inhabit are waiting. And the story that began with a disgraced grandfather fleeing into exile ends with a granddaughter prepared to redeem everything he lost. This is the legacy that matters, not the inheritance of wealth or title, but the inheritance of purpose, the understanding that power exists to serve those who grant it, that crowns are heaviest when worn with humility, that the greatest monarchs are those who give more to their nations than they take. Princess Leonor has learned these lessons well. She carries them forward into a future that belongs to her and to the millions of Spaniards who will share her journey. The story continues. The hope endures. The princess is ready to become a queen, and Spain, watching and waiting, is ready to believe in her.